What is the $1 powder that supposedly makes your firewood last 12 hours? The one firewood sellers hope you never learn about. I will give it to you straight. It is not a powder you buy and sprinkle on. It is the bed of wood ash already sitting in the bottom of your stove. The stuff you keep shoveling out every morning, and used right it carries a fire most of the night. Free. Nobody sells it because nobody can. I have heated my place in central Pennsylvania with wood for better than 20 years. And for the first 10 I did the one thing that guarantees a cold, short fire. Every single morning I shoveled my stove out clean, scraped it down to bare steel, dumped every speck of ash, and felt good about it, like I was keeping a tidy ship. I was throwing away the best free tool I owned. Stay to the end, because there are two things here worth waiting for. 1. There is a whole shelf of products at the hardware store that promise the exact thing this title does: the 12-hour log, the burn extender powder in the shaker can, and I will tell you plainly what those actually are and whether any of them beat free ash. 2. I will give you the exact morning routine that relights your fire off last night's coals in under a minute with no paper and no kindling, which is the real payoff of doing this right. And before anybody types it into the comments, no, you do not sprinkle a magic dust on a log and get 12 hours out of it. That is not how fire works, and you know it. What you do is stop wasting the ash you already make and start using it the way the old hands did. You know the routine I'm not talking about because you probably did it this morning. Coffee in one hand, little shovel in the other, scooping out the firebox until it is clean and gray bare, hauling the bucket out to the ash pile, feeling productive. Then tonight you build a fire on cold bare steel, and it takes paper and kindling and 20 minutes of babysitting to get going. And it burns hot and fast and is gone by 1 in the morning, clean stove, cold house. Most people think ash is just waste, the leftover trash of a fire, and that the tidier you keep the box, the better you are doing. That is exactly backward. The folks who get all-night burns are not keeping a cleaner stove than you. They are keeping a dirtier one on purpose. Here is what is actually happening in that firebox, and it is the whole reason this works. A wood fire does not give you its real overnight heat from flames. It gives it from coals, that deep bed of glowing charcoal that forms after the flames die down. Flames are the first hour. Coals are the next 10. There is real chemistry under that. The flames are the volatile gases burning off fast in the first hour. The coals are the lignin, the tough woody glue that holds a tree together, breaking down slow, and that slow breakdown is where most of your steady, usable heat actually comes from. A fire is 2 engines. The flame engine is loud and fast and short. The coal engine is quiet and slow and long. The all-night heat is the coal engine, and the coal engine only runs as long as the bed stays hot. That is where the ash comes in. A bed of wood ash, an inch or so deep, sitting on the floor of your firebox, is one of the best insulators you can put under a fire. It does 2 jobs at once. It holds a blanket of heat against the bottom of the coal bed, so the coals do not bleed their warmth into the cold steel and masonry below. And it lets you bury and bank live coals down in it where they smolder slow instead of burning out fast. Think about a campfire. You kick some dirt and ash over the coals at night, and in the morning you rake it back, and there are still live embers you can blow back to life. Same exact principle. The ash is a thermal blanket. It does not burn, it is not fuel, and let me be clear about that so nobody gets the wrong idea. It is insulation. And insulation under a coal bed is the difference between live coals at 6 in the morning and a cold gray box. Let me put the money part in front of you, since the title brought it up. There is a product on the shelf called a Firewood burn extender, a powder you shake onto your wood, and a thing called a 12-hour log, and between them people spend real money every winter chasing what a free inch of ash does for nothing. And since I promised, let me tell you what those shelf products actually are. The 12-hour log is usually compressed sawdust and wax, and a single one of those burns shorter than a load of real seasoned hardwood, not longer. It just burns even and clean for a few hours. The Shake-On Burn extender powders are mostly the same salt-based compounds sold as creosote modifiers, and what they do, when they do anything at all, is help keep your flue clean, not stretch your burn time. Neither one makes a log last 12 hours. Dense dry wood on a banked coal bed over an ash blanket does that, and that combination does not fit in a shaker can, so nobody can sell it to you. Run the numbers on the products. A box of those compressed logs runs $8 or $10 and gets you one evening. The shaker can additives are $20 to $30 a tub. Burn through that all winter, year after year, and you have spent hundreds chasing what the ash in your firebox does for free. And that is the grain of truth buried in the title. Nobody in the business of selling you wood, or logs, or additives, or a service call makes a dime telling you to use the ash you already have. It is not a conspiracy. There is just no money in free, so nobody bothers to mention it. Sit with that. The thing they sell you to fix a short burn is a stand-in for the thing you shovel out of your stove and throw away every single morning. The depth is where people get it wrong in both directions. Too little ash and you get no insulation, just bare steel pulling heat out of your coals all night. Too much ash and you bury your air inlet, choke the fire, and smother it into a cold, smoky mess by midnight. The sweet spot most stove makers and the regulars on the hearth.com forums land on is about 1 inch of ash on the firebox floor, roughly the thickness of your thumb laid flat. A lot of modern EPA-certified stove manuals, meaning stoves built to the federal clean burning standard, actually tell you in writing to keep about a 1-inch ash bed and not run the stove scraped bare. The manufacturers know. Most owners never read past page 3. 1 inch. Keep that as your floor, scrape off what builds above it, and leave the rest. I learned the too much side the hard way. One winter I got proud of the trick and let the bed build to 3 or 4 inches. Figuring more insulation had to be better, and I buried my lower air inlet without realizing it and smothered 3 overnight fires in a row into cold tar before I worked out what I had done. More is not better. 1 inch. Now the part that makes the ash bed actually deliver, because the ash alone does not do it. The ash is one leg of the stool. You need 3 things working together: dense, dry hardwood, a deep coal bed, and the ash blanket under it. Miss any one of the 3 and you do not get the all-night burn. You are probably picturing your own stove right now and the bare, clean floor you left in it this morning. Yeah, that habit is part of what is costing you the coals. The setup itself goes like this. About 30 minutes before you turn in, cut your air back part way and let the fire settle and burn down to a thick bed of coals. You want the flames mostly gone and a deep glowing bed across the bottom, sitting on top of your inch of ash. A good bed is 2 or 3 inches of glowing coals, not a few orange chunks, a solid layer you could almost shovel. That is what carries the fire while the big wood above it slowly catches and feeds down into it. Think about that. The exact thing you carry out to the pile every morning is the thing that would have kept your house warm till dawn. And you build that coal bed across the whole day. It does not appear from one log. Every time you reload through the evening, you are stacking up coals under the new wood. So by bedtime, a stove that has been running all evening has a deep bed ready to bank. A stove you light cold at 9 at night has almost no bed and will not hold the night no matter what you do. The overnight burn is set up by the whole day's fire, not the last log. Rake those coals forward toward the air inlet so they get air and stay lit. Then load your overnight wood, and the wood choice matters as much as anything. Use the densest, driest hardwood you have. Oak or hickory or hard maple or black locust in splits, pieces about as thick as your forearm or bigger. Species matters for banking, not just for heat. Oak and black locust hold coals the longest, dense and slow, the best overwood there is. Ash and cherry light easier and burn cleaner but coal out faster, so they are better for the evening than for the overnight load. If you have locust, save it for the last load before bed. If your splits are thinner than your wrist, the load burns through too fast to hold the night. So save wrist-thick stuff for starting the fire, not for banking it. Pack the big splits in tight front to back the long way in the box, not left to right. Front to back matters for 2 reasons. It keeps the splits from blocking your primary air, which is the main air feeding the fire, and it keeps a log from rolling forward against the glass and cracking it. Pack them close, almost touching, because tight wood burns slower from the facing edges inward. Once the load is in, let catch and char for 10 or 15 minutes with the air still up, then cut the air right down to a low setting. The flames drop to a slow hover, the load smolders down over the coals, and the ash blanket underneath keeps the whole coal bed alive. Same burn zone idea from the thermometer video. You are not slamming the air shut, you are easing it down to where the fire just creeps, hot enough to stay clean but slow enough to last. Choke it dead and you trade an all-night burn for a flue full of creosote. A good airtight stove loaded that way on dry dense wood will carry 8 to 12 hours and leave you coals in the morning. Not every stove and not every wood, and I will get to where it does not work. But that is the system that delivers what the title promises. And not one piece of it came out of a shaker can. Cold matters here too. On a brutal single-digit night, your chimney drafts hard and pulls air through the fire faster, so the coals burn down quicker and you want that ash bed deeper and your air cut further back. On a mild 35-degree night, the draft is lazy and the same load coasts easy. Up in the cold North Country, In Maine or the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, the ash bed earns its keep every single night. Down in milder country, you may only lean on it on the coldest ones. And on those coldest nights, the ones where it is below zero, and the wind is pulling your chimney like a straw, that is exactly when the ash bed matters most. Because that is when a bare floor fire dies by 2 in the morning, and leaves you waking up to a 40-degree living room. Let me be straight about where this falls apart, because it does. First, an open fireplace will not do this no matter how much ash you bank, because an open hearth loses too much air up the flue to ever hold an overnight burn. This is a closed stove or insert move, a firebox with a door and an air control, and the tighter that stove seals, the better this works. An old smoke dragon with a warped door and a leaky gasket pulls air it should not all night and burns your coals down early no matter how you bank. If your overnight burns die fast even on dry wood and a good bed, check your door gasket before you blame anything else. A $10 roll of stove gasket rope can buy you back 2 hours of burn. Second, wet wood kills it dead. If your splits read above 25% moisture, about the wetness of a sponge you wrung out once, no ash bed on earth gives you 12 hours, because wet wood spends the night steaming instead of coaling. Dry wood under 20% is the price of entry. Third, watch your stove's design. If it feeds air from the bottom or has a grate and an ash pan made for shaking ash out the bottom, a thick ash bed works against that design and you manage it differently. Know your stove. And fourth, the safety one. That last one is worth a hard stop because it kills people every year. Live coals hide down in a bed of wood ash and stay hot enough to start a fire. For days, sometimes more than a week, long after the visible fire is out and the ash looks dead and cool on top. The National Fire Protection Association ties a real share of home fires every year to ashes dumped too soon into the wrong container. When you scrape off the excess above your 1-inch bed, it goes into a metal bucket with a metal lid, the kind you buy for about $25 or $30 at any hardware store, and that bucket sits outside on bare dirt or concrete, well away from the house, the deck, and the woodpile, for several days before it goes anywhere near the burn pile. I keep mine a good 10 feet off the back of the house on open ground. Treat cold-looking ash like it is hot, because some of it is. You can test this whole thing in one night. Bank a load tonight over 1 inch of ash, go to bed, and just go look in the morning. The coals will tell you everything you need to know. Once you stop seeing ash as trash, it changes how you run the whole stove. You stop managing flames and start managing coals and ash, which is what the people who burn wood for 30 years actually do. They are not better at building a roaring fire than you. They are better at keeping a quiet one alive. And this is where I will argue with half the advice online. Everybody fixates on the wood, the perfect species, the perfect split, the perfect seasoning, and all of that does matter. But 2 guys can load the identical oak into the identical stove, and the one who banked it on a deep coal bed over 1 inch of ash wakes up to live coals, while the one who built it on a box he scraped to bare metal is relighting from cold and cussing at his kindling. Same wood. The whole difference was the ash he threw away. This is the same principle people pay thousands of dollars for in a soapstone stove or a masonry heater, a woodstock or a hearthstone running $3,000 or $4,000, where the whole point is a heavy mass that soaks up heat and an insulated core that holds it and gives it back slow for hours after the fire is down. Your inch of free ash is the poor man's version of that same idea. Working on your coal bed instead of on the room. The physics does not care whether you paid for it. On my own firewood log, the nights I banked a deep load over a proper ash bed ran me 8 to 10 hours to cold coals, against 4 or 5 hours the lazy way on a bare floor. I will not pretend a firewood log is a laboratory, and your stove and your wood will read different. But the gap was big enough and steady enough that I quit scraping the box years ago and never went back. The clean stove habit comes from somewhere real, by the way. An open fireplace you do want to keep cleaner, and your grandmother shoveling the ash every morning was probably tending an open hearth or an old leaky stove where the ash did nothing for her. The closed airtight stove changed the math, and the habit just never caught up to it. Which brings me to the morning, the part that sells the whole thing. Because you ran an ash bed and banked your coals instead of burning them out, you wake up to a firebox with live coals still down in it, not cold gray powder. The relight takes under a minute and not a scrap of paper. You open the air, take a poker, and rake the coals up out of the ash bed to the front where the air hits them, and they brighten right up, orange and breathing. Lay 2 or 3 small dry splits across those coals, leave the air wide open and the door cracked for a couple of minutes, and the coals light the wood on their own. No newspaper, no kindling, no kneeling on a cold hearth at 6 in the morning with a lighter. You go from a cold start, a 20-minute paper and kindling chore, to a 60-second poke and load every morning all winter. Across a 5-month season that is hours of your life handed back, on top of the wood you saved. You have felt how good that morning is, even if it only happened by accident once or twice. The time you came down expecting a dead cold box and found live coals instead, and the fire was going again before you were really awake. That was not luck. Something under those coals held the heat through the night. You can make it happen on purpose, starting tonight. The old-timer who showed me this never started a fire twice all winter. He lit it once in the fall and kept coals alive on an ash bed clear through to spring, just feeding it and banking it. As for keeping the bed right, you do not measure it with a ruler. Once a week or so, when the ash has built past an inch and is creeping toward the air inlet, scrape the surplus off the top into your metal bucket and leave the inch underneath. That is the entire maintenance. Scrape the extra, keep the base. Never go back to bare steel. My wife came out one cold morning and watched me rake yesterday's coals up and have a fire going before the coffee. Finished, without touching the kindling box, and asked when I had learned to do that. I told her I had been doing it wrong for 10 years and only just quit. She said that tracked. The bucket of ash by the back door she is less sold on. She keeps asking why we are keeping a pail of dirt, and I keep telling her it is a fire safety container, and she keeps looking at it like it is a pail of dirt. She is not entirely wrong. My logger neighbor, who has heated with wood his whole life, watched me hauling a clean bucket of ash out one fall and just said, "You know you are carrying your morning fire out to the pile, right?" He was right. He is always right. I have made my peace with it. The leftover ash does earn its keep in spring, though. A light scatter on the garden where the soil runs sour and acidic, since wood ash sweetens sour ground a little. But that is a whole other conversation, and you can overdo it fast. Go look in your stove. If you scraped it down to bare metal this morning out of habit, leave an inch in there tonight and bank your coals on top of it, and see what is waiting for you at dawn. Next time we are getting into reading the smoke off your own chimney from out in the yard, because the color and the speed of it tell you whether you are banking a clean fire or smothering a dirty one before you ever step back inside. The free fix was in the bottom of your stove the whole time. You have been hauling it out to the ash pile every morning like it was the problem.